This week I went to a men's retreat with my brother. It was hosted by Sacred Sons. The retreat happened out in Salem, Oregon at Camp Merriweather. Our plan was to drive up from San Francisco, make a 2-day pit stop in ASHLAND, and then from ASHLAND head out to Salem, Camp Merriweather. So me and my brother headed out of San Francisco at about 12 p.m. out to Oregon. The car ride up was pretty uneventful. I drove, but I wasn't enjoying my brother's music. He was playing his playlist because he wanted to sleep on the way up. I pretty much just sat and bared with it because I didn't want to engage in conflict. I thought that if I told him to switch it, it would just be a pain in the ass and we would just end up getting into a little petty argument. We arrived at about 4 p.m. at our friend's ranch. I was exhausted, so I just had a bite to eat and then hit the sack and went to sleep. In the morning, our friend told us about this hot spring that was about 8 minutes away. So we reserved our spots there and we went with him and my brother and enjoyed the hot spring. At the hot spring, there was this old, wise-looking guy with like a beard and really long eyebrows. So I built up the courage and swam over to him and started talking to him. I wanted to ask him about how he made decisions in his life. Being someone who's lived such a long life, he looked like he was in his 80s. He must have had to make a lot of decisions along the way. So I asked him, what do you do to make a good choice? Actually, what do you do to make a choice? Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. He looked at me and he responded, I just play with whatever life puts in front of me. And when I do start thinking about how to make a choice, I just go, stop, 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 stop. It was a really good explanation to not just get like so up in your head. So I learned to just be playful with life, to engage with life like it's a game. The rest of our trip in ASHLAND, we enjoyed healthy organic food, and then me and my brother took a long walk through one of their nature parks. The next day we woke up and headed out to Camp Merriweather. We were kind of off to a slow start because we slept in. The weather was terrible out. It was just pouring rain, heavy, heavy rain. This time my brother drove. I was really nervous. He just got his license recently. I was nervous because he was speeding in some areas. And at one point of the trip, the car even slipped because it was a slippery, wet road. Again, I didn't know how to confront him about this or to say that I felt nervous and unsafe. I was afraid that we would just start to argue and it would just become more dangerous. This became a reoccurring theme during the trip, something that I'm still working on. Finally, we arrived at Camp Merriweather and the rain was pouring down heavier than ever. We arrived at Camp Merriweather. We were assigned cabins, so we had to go and find which one we were meant to sleep in. This posed a real challenge because the trails to the cabins were muddy and wet, and all of our stuff had to be taken out of our car. My brother decided just to sleep in the car. I got all my stuff out to the cabin. About 30 minutes later, I brought the rest of my stuff from the car to the cabin, and a guy was in there and he asked me to leave the cabin. I said, no, I've put my stuff in this cabin. It's first come, first serve. Why should I leave the cabin? And he said to me, well, there's plenty of other cabins. I just kind of want to sleep alone, and it'd be nice if you could just go to another cabin. At this point, I was like, oh my God, does this guy like not like me or something? So I looked at this guy in my cabin as it was dark, as it was raining outside. I did not feel like moving all my stuff to a new cabin and having to go out in the rain again. And I said to him, why exactly do you want me to move? And he looked at me, he said, well, I'm nervous that you're gonna snore, and I'm a light sleeper. I just can't sleep, like I just can't handle that. And I told him, hey, I don't snore. It's chill, dude. Snoring actually happens through mouth breathing. I'm not a mouth breather, don't worry. And he looked at me, he was like, oh yeah, I know about mouth breathing. I'm really into that. And then we just ended up bonding over mouth breathing and became friends after that. So it was very funny that what was a conflict I was able to resolve, and it actually ended up making me and this guy feel closer. So the next morning we woke up at around 7 a.m. and we went to do check-in. Nice shot. Me and my brother were part of Team Dragon Spirit at this retreat.
You got a sniper gun there, dude. The loudest thing is the bullet hitting the water.
The first activity was just going around a circle and telling everyone what our name was, where we came from, and a little bit about why we were there. Afterwards, we did this activity where we walk all around the room with a bunch of other men, look the men in their eyes, try to make eye contact, and then the facilitator will say, put your hand on a man that you trust. And then every person will put their hand on a person that they trust. Some men had 4 or 5 hands on them, other men had no hands on them. Some men didn't feel comfortable putting their hands on anyone. As the retreat went on, I noticed that my brother wasn't really around or on time to these meetings that we had. And I started getting worried. I was like, wow, we came all the way out here and he's just not showing up. These feelings were like the feelings I had when we were at the airport and I had to keep an eye on my little siblings. I was just in the habit of always worrying about where they were. And in some sense, it was my challenge of letting go of control. We had our second check-in and I sat down and I noticed that my brother wasn't there at all. So I went out to the hall and I saw that he had switched to another team. The other team was called Staghorn. I walked back to the Dragon Spirit team and I told the facilitator, Albert, that he had switched. And Albert looked at me and said, yeah, he might just not want to be on your team. He might not feel comfortable being on the same team as you and opening up. And Albert said, look, you just gotta learn to let go of that control or fear you have. And I just started tearing up like, man, that hurts to lose a brother from my team. It could seem so insignificant, but for me it was so significant. Albert saw that I was tearing up and he said, hey, are you ready? We can do the men's ceremony now. And I looked at him and I said, okay, like, here we go. What happens in men's ceremony is that one man will step in the center of a big circle made up of other men. So it's about 40 or 50 guys standing in a circle, and a man steps into the middle of that circle with the facilitator, and the facilitator asks questions that open up the person to their heart. They'll ask questions about the past, about their traumas, and it's a space where a man can feel safe to cry, to be vulnerable, and to confront those issues that he's faced with in his past. So I stepped into the circle and Albert started asking me a few questions. And I remember saying that I feel like I'm holding the whole world these days. Like I feel like I have so many responsibilities. Life is going so much faster than I thought it would. And Albert said, do you want to be held? And I said, yes, I want to know what it's like to feel held. I don't feel like I've been held in so long. And so all of the men grabbed me and hoisted me up from below. And I was lying on my back on a bed of hands. And I felt held and I just was crying and surrendering to that. I noticed that my body was so tense. But after I'd been held, it softened into all these men's hands that were literally supporting me. And that was my first breakthrough in this experience. The next day, we had this amazing sweat lodge experience. We got to the sweat lodge and we stood around the fire. It was freezing and it was early in the morning. The sweat lodge was directly on the mud. A sweat lodge is this Native American hut structure that is usually covered with animal skins, but in this case was covered with blankets. And they heat up stones until they get red hot. And then they put the stones in the sweat lodge and they pour water on the red hot stones to create steam. And the steam is held within the sweat lodge, which is pitch black. During the sweat lodge sessions, the medicine man or the shaman or the chief will sing songs and will sing chants that will help open up your heart and your spirit to guidance from your ancestors or whatever entities may be. So the sweat lodge started and we were all huddled inside this dome structure. It was very tight, very cramped. The first chant started to begin, and in my vision, I saw all the women of my life step in a line. And then the chants went on and on and on, and men were crying and screaming and laughing and praying and saying prayers out loud. And it was such a human experience, an orchestra of emotions, an orchestra of stories and sounds. It was beautiful. Between each of these chanting sessions, there's a moment where they open up the doorway to the sweat lodge to put new red hot stones in. During this time, my brother said that he felt this barrier between him and white people. Like he felt defensive when one of the guys drove up to him at the retreat in his big truck, this white dude. He felt like he had to be on his defense. And he himself figured out that this had come from being in a Catholic middle school, and his friends were mostly white, and the dads would just intimidate him or make him feel small and unimportant. This was, I think, a breakthrough for my brother to see how all these white men were with all these colored men, and what all these men at the end of the day were brothers and were there together to support each other and to be there for each other. He was able to transcend that past trauma of the stereotypical oppressing white man and to just see these guys as his bros, as men here to support him. At the very end of the sweat lodge, we all crawled out. And the reason we crawl out is because a sweat lodge is the representation of the mother's womb. And when you first come out of your mother, you are a baby and you can only crawl. You don't stand up in the sweat lodge. Like, you're not adult yet, you stay on your knees. And so my brother was one of the first to crawl out, and he stood up too early, and Albert, the guy on my team, said to him, "Don't stand up, get down, you have to crawl." And my brother felt that he had said that with anger. I didn't realize that at the time, but I found out a little later on. Later that night, we were at a music festival that was just going on in the forest. There was a huge bonfire in the middle, and we were just enjoying the music.
And I got my lightsaber. I'm the sub right here. Right here.
At one point, my brother came up to me and said that he had accidentally ate some chocolate mushrooms, which I thought was hilarious. And then he told me that he felt that Albert had been treating him with anger, and he felt that the guys there were treating him childishly because he was one of the youngest guys there. Whatever you're feeling, you need to go confront him on that. And I said, we can go and confront him tomorrow if you'd like. And my brother was like, yeah, sure. On my way back to my cabin, I started talking to this other brother. And I was telling him about the situation I had just had with Aladdin, my brother. And he said to me, Aladdin needs to confront Aubert on his own, because if you go with him and confront Aubert, well then, how is that any different? How is that not treating him childishly? He needs to go on his own. He needs to lead himself. And I was like, oh yeah, holy shit. And so I prayed, I was like, yo, Aladdin, you got this, you gotta do this yourself, you got this, bro. And it turns out that he went and he confronted Albert on his own. Everything just worked out smoothly. So they resolved it. I'm not sure what the resolution was, but they resolved it. Finally, the end of the retreat arrived, and we were all preparing to go. I was taking my time, but my brother wanted to get out there immediately. He's very impatient, and he just wanted to go, and start moving, you know, get on the road as soon as possible. And I felt rushed. I had to get a sleeping bag back that I'd borrowed to a friend, and I didn't know where my friend was, and Camp Merriweather is huge, and so I was running around trying to get it back, and I was anxious and my heart was beating fast, and I felt rushed, and then I started feeling angry. Finally, I was like, dude, you're like making me angry, Aladdin. Like, you're pissing me off right now. And I luckily had a brother, Samson, who was one of the assistant facilitators, sit down with me. And he said, Anoah, what's happening? I said, I'm angry at my brother. I'm fucking angry. I had attached this anger to him. And he said, no, like, close your eyes. What's going on? And I said, oh, man, I'm like all like tight in my chest and there's heat going to my head. I'm just feeling so bad. And he said, notice that. And then he said to me, what else do you notice? And I tuned into my body and I was like, ooh, I noticed that I can't feel my feet and my legs at all. And he said, okay. He just smiled. And I was like, oh. And then as my attention went down to my feet and my legs, all that anger just went away. Just sizzled and fizzled away. And I got up and I was able to walk over to my brother and just ask him without any emotional charge or anger charge, what's going on? Like, how can we make this work? I'm trying to understand you. And we came to the understanding that me and my brother have very, very different methods of thinking. He's a linear thinker and I'm a lateral thinker. And that's not set in stone, but in general, to know that we have these characteristics helped us understand each other better. For my brother, what makes him comfortable is when there's a plan, we're gonna do this first, this second, this third. He likes to know what's going to happen in the future. For me, I am a lateral thinker. I thrive in the chaos, in just doing everything last minute without a plan, and what's hard for me is planning. So, of course, we butt heads when we don't understand about each other. So our compromise was that whenever we hang out together, I would hop on board and say, okay, I'll sit down with you and let's write a plan. And he was like, yeah, sounds good. And we felt like we had come to a understanding and resolution. My brother had also realized that his challenge was being patient, to slow down. And so he got to uncover that and to face chaos, to face uncertainty, something that he can now work on and strengthen himself in. And then I got to realize that I need more structure in my life, more organization, and to focus on one thing at a time and follow through. So we had our breakthroughs at the retreat, but there was still something in my heart that was like, I really feel like we could have broken through a little bit more. And that happened in the car ride back home. We were sitting in the car, we were playing music, and we had a few little minor conflicts. And then eventually we got to talking about the things we learned about women. And I said that my dorm mate was talking about how women love to connect on problems. This is just a generalization. Maybe not all women feel this way, but this is what we were just talking about. And my dorm mate said that a woman just wants you to listen to her and to not be Mr. Fix-It and say, here's a solution to the problem, go take this and like stop talking to me. She wants you to listen to her problem and empathize with her, and that's where she feels like she's getting connection. That's where she feels like there's a bond being built. And then I started saying that it's like, I need to listen to my mom. I need to hold her and be there to support her, and not just say like, here's a solution to your problem, go take these. Like, that's just cheap words. Like, I need to just sit there, listen, and support. That's what it means to really be a man for a woman, to support, tend to hold, you know, with our strength, because we got that. And I started tearing up after I'd said that. It was really real for me. As I started tearing up, my brother turned the music off and it was just silence, and he said, I have something that I need to get off my chest. And he told me that during the period of our dad was dying, I texted him and I'd said, Latin, why aren't you here right now? You need to be here. Dad's dying. I was the only one with my dad when he was dying, because I was the one who got that text to go over. It just happened to be that way. And when I texted my brother that, it made him feel ashamed that he wasn't there. And I said, like, when he said that, I just started crying too. And I was like, man, when I texted you that day, it was because I was scared that I was alone here with my dad and he was dying. I just didn't know what to do. And I wish Mom and you and my little sister Aura were here with me during that time. So it was really a call out for help. And I'm sorry that it came out as fear and anger towards you. And then at that moment, something just shifted, and we had basically dropped this pent up emotion that we had against each other, that he told me this is why he had been isolating from me and why he didn't talk to me as much, because of that just those texts I had sent him before our dad had died. It was that pent up shame and guilt and blame that I'd put on him and he'd put on himself that had come in between us. And it had taken us 2 years to like just drop that. And that all came full circle to women talk about their problems and they're always solving their problems. Men will like pent up their emotions for a long time and then all at once just let it all out. That's how it feels. That's how it was for us. But after we had that breakthrough, that emotional cathartic release, we had a connection. There was a real connection. Before there wasn't any connection. We were just, there's this wall of shame and guilt and blame between us. But after that, we were able to connect, and we're now connecting even stronger. And as the week went on after the retreat, we were having conflicts, but the difference is we were resolving those conflicts, and we weren't just punching heads and then going and walking away from it and not dealing with it. We were punching heads until we both came to like the understanding and we could shake hands and separate. And we were having conflicts where we took it all the way through. And this is the most important takeaway I had, which is conflict is the soil for growth. It is so important to have healthy conflict in our lives. And what we found out was how to have that healthy conflict, which is essentially you just got to keep on talking and talking and talking until you get to the resolution. And you cannot insult each other. You have to listen to each other and drop your ego, and it just takes time. But the more conflicts we've been having, the conversations we have after the conflict is resolved are amazing, are mind stimulating and eye-opening. And the more conversations we've had, the more we've come to the realization that we need to start a podcast, because we are like yin and yang. He's a linear thinker, I'm a lateral thinker. He's a logician, I'm a magician. He's like Sherlock Holmes, I'm like Merlin. And our duo, that tension like we create with each other is amazing. We are each other's weaknesses and we are each other's strengths. My strengths are the strengths that he needs to work on. His strengths are the strengths that I need to work on. And so we just like fit with each other so well, and the conversations are so magical. We were like, we need to record these because the world will benefit from hearing these conversations. So we're starting a podcast, and it's gonna be awesome. And I wanna just put that out as a teaser right now. I'm not gonna go too much into it, but stay tuned for that. It's gonna be dope. And yeah, that was my trip with my brother to Oregon, to our men's retreat with Sacred Sons. That was very life-changing, and it was amazing. Anyways, that's it. Thank you for listening and being patient and listening to my whole story, and that's all. Peace.
Oops, go ahead.
So, gun safety.
Yeah, give us a gun safety 101, Jill.
Yeah.
This is a handgun and it's a revolver, so it doesn't have a safety, okay? So this gun is fully loaded and live. It doesn't matter if it's not loaded. You want to always treat it as if it is, okay? You have to realize, do not point this anywhere and do not stick your finger in the trigger. It's got to be outside.
Whether you know it's loaded, unloaded, you treat it like it's loaded. End of story.
Because a gun can end someone's story.
That's right. That's right.
Come here and look at this tree, man. It's got balls. It's got nuts.
Real nuts.